Good morning, everyone. My name is Josselin Pinot, and I'm a PhD candidate at Paris 1 Panthéon-Sorbonne University. My research focuses on the occupation of the mountain in the micro-region of AlUla from the end of the second millennium BCE to the end of the Iron Age. Firstly, as a co-organizer of this symposium, I'd like to express my gratitude to Stéphane Lemaguer once again to the great adventure of the 2 years it took to prepare this event, as well as the members of the scientific committee, the moderators and the volunteers, the Association Route de l'Orient, the Institut du Monde Arabe, Archaïos, and all our partners. Today, I'd like to present some of the research I have had the privilege of carrying out as part of a multidisciplinary project known as the Dadan Archaeological Project, led by Jérôme Romer and Abdulrahman Al-Souebani. I'm delighted to share with you today through this lecture, in the first part, a very brief overview of who the Minaeans were, their role in the incense trade, and in the second part, their place in the AlUla Valley, in particular with the results obtained after 4 campaigns in the Jabal Hurayba. So I would like to talk about a fascinating topic, the incense road. Caravan trade is estimated to have begun at the end of the second millennium or the beginning of the first millennium BCE, and to have lasted until the turn of the Christian era. I won't elaborate on the Sabian monopoly on control of the aromatics trade during the period of the Mukaribs, but rather on the period of the caravan kingdoms between the 5th and the 1st centuries BC, and in particular with the kingdom of Minaeans. What are we referring to when we talk about incense? Well, incense is a substance that can be burnt to produce a fragrant smoke, in this case, Lebanon resin and myrrh. This increased demand in the first millennium can be explained by the extensive use of these resins in religious ritual and funeral rites in Egypt and throughout the Near East. However, this was not the only commodity transported along this route, as there was also an important trade in spices from India. This road is also the occasion for important cultural and people exchanges. So, during the second half of the first millennium BCE, it was the Minéans who played a major role in this caravan trade, transport and sale, as Pliny the Elder already noted in his natural histories in the 1st century AD. But who were the Minéans? The history and historiography of the Minéans is complex. The epigraphic and archaeological discoveries of the 2000s in the Yemeni Jowf have considerably renewed knowledge in this field, and I would like to acknowledge my colleagues that did a remarkable work in this field, namely Mounir Arbash, Jérémy Chitkat, Irénée Rossi, François Bron, and others. Minaeans then became a big kingdom at the end of the 7th century BCE. It was also during this period that the town of Yatil, modern Barakish, became part of the Minean kingdom. Unfortunately, the data are incomplete since only one of the cities has been scientifically excavated, namely Yatil, by the Italian mission led by the late Alessandro de Maigret. The capital city, Karnar, located 10 kilometers north of Barakish, has only benefited from architectural and epigraphic surveys. In order to consolidate their trade network across Arabia, the Mineans set up trading posts in various parts of the peninsula and beyond. In the south, in the Katabanite capital of Tamna, further north at the gateway to present-day Yemen in Najran, on the road leading to the Gulf in Kiryat al-Fao, in AlUla, of course, as well as we will see in more details today. But traces are attested much further afield, as on the island of Delos and in Egypt. The southernmost trading post on the peninsula is attested in the Katabanite capital of Tamna, as demonstrated by this long inscription on the left. Mineo-Katabanite matrimonial alliances are also known, and there are joint dedications to ensure the protection of Mineans and Katabanite gods and rulers. Further north, Najran is located in the southwestern part to the present-day Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Its first occupation may be linked to the development of the Minean caravan trade. For the caravans laden with aromatics, this was the first oasis to provide a stopover. Moreover, the site forms a crossroad between the road to Palestine and Egypt and the other road to the Arabian Gulf. The presence of the South Arabian kingdom of Main is well attested on the site. This inscription found in Main is the first evidence of Main's role in the caravan trade on the Arabian Peninsula, and it also associates the deity of Main with the main god of Najran. At Kiryat Al-Fao, the Minéan occupation is during the phase Kiryat I. This period dates from the beginning of the 3rd to the end of the 1st century BC. This corresponds to a time when Minaeans were very active in trans-Arab trade. 4 Minéan texts were found in this area on the small temple of Wad and Astar, included these 2 bronze artifacts. The left one is a dedication to 5 deities of the Minéan Panthéon by its author, who calls themselves the servants of Wad, a Minéan god of first importance. The artifacts on the right is also a dedication to the main deities of Main. 2 interesting but slightly different cases involving Minéans merchants who left their marks far beyond their motherland. In Egypt, the sarcophagus, already mentioned by Jérôme before, of a Minéan merchant responsible for importing aromatics for the temples of the Ptolemaic kingdom has been found. So this particular case also shows a high level of cultural integration into Egyptian society, since this merchant benefited from an Egyptian ceremony. While in Delos, a Minéan merchant erected an altar to Wad, so one of the main deities of the Minéan pantheon. You can see that there is an addition in Greek, probably slightly later, that reads to Wad, gods of the Minéan. This attests to a trade network reaching as far as the Nile Valley and the Aegean Sea, and at a later time than previous occurrences. Christian Robin dates both the sarcophagus and the altar to the second half of the 2nd century BCE. After this initial contextual overview, we now turn to AlUla, which in many ways seems quite different. During the first millennium, the oasis of AlUla held significant strategic importance due to its location along the Incense Road and its role as a crossroad connecting the southern Arabian Peninsula, Egypt, and the Levant. The AlUla Valley itself is a wide wadi surrounded by canyons and perpendicular wadis. The landscape is dominated by sandstone massif that overlooks the valley. I'd like to mention here the work carried out by my colleague Bertrand Ribat, who is leading the excavation of Area E as part of the Dadan archaeological project. His work was presented at the Seminar for Arabian Study in Paris this year. Although there is no tangible proof of the presence of a Minéan building in Area E of this date, this area is traditionally considered to be the settlement of the Minéans. The first 3 excavation campaigns were dedicated to the excavation of several late antique levels. However, there are important clues to the presence of the Minéans, in particular the proximity of the sanctuary I'm about to present to you, the proximity of the lion's tombs, and the large group of Minéan rock inscriptions. Furthermore, Bertrand Ribat found at least 16 fragments of Minéan inscription in Area E, including legal text and the name of a king. But we can't rule out the possibility that the builders took these blocks from more or less nearby buildings. With regard to the possibility that these blocks may have been moved, we can mention a fragment of a monumental inscription block that was found in a demolition layer in 2020 in Area C, excavated by Fabien Lesguet, also as part of the Dadan archaeological project. This block, over 30 centimeters wide, is clearly part of a longer text, And although it cannot be ruled out that it is two letters from another word, here they form the word Wad, the aforementioned Minéan deity. Many other texts found at Dadan, such as the one on the right, evoke the presence of a temple to Wad. Although the building has not yet been identified, as Jerome said, but its presence is certain. According to the text, this temple played a central role in trade and the collection of trade taxes. I would like to remind you that more than 70 monumental inscriptions in the corpus of marginal Minoic inscriptions found beyond Maine, 50 of them come from Dadan. And these inscriptions are of prime importance. For instance, we know that members of a merchant tribal elite lived in Dadan and married Dadanite women. We even know that one of them was appointed chief of the Minaeans of Dadan. Without further ado, let's talk about the Jabal above Dadan. Jabal al-Khurayba, positioned on the eastern flank of the AlUla Valley, overlooks the ancient city of Dadan, which was inhabited from the 3rd millennium BC until the early 1st millennium CE. Jabal al-Khurayba has a particularly steep topography featuring some of the highest peaks in the area, with the highest point reaching an elevation of more than 1,000 meters above sea level, resulting in a difference of 250 meters with the site. We shall mention here previous expedition and survey conducted in the valley, but time is short. In 2020, a systematic pedestrian survey of this mountain was undertaken as part of the Dadan archaeological project, and I was fortunate enough to take part. During the first campaign, the southwestern corner of Jabal Khurayba was covered. It was during this first campaign that we were able to study the so-called Southern Sanctuary that will be the main topic of today's lecture. This sanctuary is a Minéan high place. Why do we define it as a mountaintop sanctuary? It is a processional path made of rock-cut stairs and bridge wall connecting peaks and leading to the highest peak in the mountain. It is associated with hundreds of Minoic inscriptions. We can thus consider that it belonged to the community of South Arabian merchants based in Dadan between the 4th and the 1st century BCE. On this map, you can see the main access to the mountain, but also the main archaeological tale and the location of the so-called Southern Sanctuary. On this zenithal view, you can have a first idea of this processional pathway, which is organized around the 4 sandstone peaks. We will now see in a more detailed description of the archaeological features recorded. The path seems to start from the southern bank of the Wadi outlet and then follow the 4 peaks previously mentioned, aligned in a southwest-northeast direction. The first structure that seems to constitute this path is the horse-shaped tower located on the edge of the cliff. We will come back to this building in detail at the end of our lecture. The processional way continues along the cliff behind the peak number 1. It is possible to climb on the walls you see on the pictures. They are wide enough, and remains of parapets are visible in some places, which could indicate the function of bridge walls. You can also note that the access to the sanctuary is completely impossible from the north because of these fortified walls and the lack of opening. Then, the second wall allowed the access by going up on it to a rock-cut stairs located on the western side of the peak number 2. You can see here the step very finely cut here on the right. To the south of the above-mentioned structure is a surprising building. The construction techniques are remarkable since the walls perfectly follow the shape of the large rocks on which they are built. Just like the building mentioned in the previous slide, this small defensive post completely prevents access to the sanctuary from the southeast. Another particularly striking clue is the presence of quarries around the 4 peaks. It seems that this quarry has several functions. The first was the extraction of stone, obviously. The second was the prevention of access to the sanctuary because of the smoothing of its walls. And finally, a third, more hypothetical, which would be the intentional monumentalization of the mountain through this smoothing operation. After several flights of stairs zigzagging steeply up the peak, you will eventually reach the top of peak number 2. A large amount of Minoic inscriptions are present along the pass. To the east, a bridge wall leads directly to another rock-cut staircase, winding up the western slope of peak 3. Similarly to peak 2, there is no construction on top of peak number 3, but only inscription along the pathway. To the east of peak number 3, the most impressive massive wall of the whole complex was built in order to reach the summit of the highest and last peak. Wall 128 is a 19.3 meters long wall, fully preserved on its central part to a height of 11 meters. This bridge wall allowed, when it was intact, at its ends to reach the last carved staircase of the processional pathway. The last rock-cut staircase includes a total of 143 steps. This monumental staircase finally allows to reach the top of the last peak. On the summit, the higher knoll in the south is the highest point in the whole massif. The top of peak number 4 features a large number of short inscriptions which were carved on the side of the higher knoll. They represent a total of 195 texts, mostly in Minoic script. Apart from that, there is no particular buildings on the summit, but numerous stelae were found. So we can think about what were they doing there if this sanctuary was an open-air sanctuary, for instance. As you can see on the picture top right, there is many quarries along the walls of the peak number 4 to prevent the access to the sanctuary and also to hypothetically monumentalize this peak. You can clearly see that all the accesses to the sanctuary are impossible from the mountain, either because of the fortification above mentioned or because of the quarries. Following the survey of the pass in 2020, the issue of how it was accessed from the ancient city of Dadan remained enigmatic. The access from the south was impossible because of the small fort. The access from the north was impossible because of the very long walls and the tower. And the rest of the sanctuary was impossible to access because of the very high walls and the quarries. The only possible access left was through the 90-meter high cliff bordering the Minéan sanctuary. This hypothesis was confirmed by a survey of the cliff with the help of mountain climbers. On this area of the mountain, we were able to record many features such as carved steps, numerous Minoic inscriptions, and rope sockets. This access started from the foot of the cliff, but was completely invisible at the first 10 meters since a quarry was cut here. It is interesting to note that this part of the quarry seems to have been cut in a rather coarse way with sledgehammers, unlike the other quarries. This might suggest an intentional destruction of the access. As you can see on this map, the distribution of the script shows a clear predominance of the ancient South Arabian inscription within the limits of the sanctuary, while Dadanitic clearly prevails in the neighboring area and generally in the rest of Jabal al-Khurayba. We recorded around 400 ancient South Arabian inscriptions. 45 were already documented by Nassif, but only 7 were fully published. The rest are new unpublished texts, mostly graffiti with personal names, more than 120 different individuals belonging to around 40 families. The highest concentration are around peak number 1, around 120 inscriptions, and on top of peak 4, around 150 inscriptions, both ends of the mountaintop pass. At least 2 of them are located in a now inaccessible place linked with quarry front carved by quarry workers. Several paleographic features date back to the second half of the first millennium BCE, including the acute angles formed by the converging bars of the diagnostic letters and the presence of apexes. Numerous monograms, artistic combination of the shape of the letters typical of the ASA writing tradition. And there is two gods that are mentioned in the ASA corpus of the Minéan sanctuary, namely Nakra and Wad. We also found 13 fragments of stela on top of peak 4. As I said before, there is no associated structure on the top of this peak, but we can think about an open-air sanctuary. There is some holes carved in the ground that could have been used to erect the stela. And one of the stela bears a stylized representation of a bull heads, artistic motif of the ancient South Arabian art, similar to some from Yemen. Since there are only 2 buildings in this area, we decided to excavate one of them. Building 207 is a tower-like building located at the top of the cliff of Dadan. It is connected to a long bridge wall and seems to mark the beginning of the Minéan processional path at the top of the cliff. It is built in a fine masonry of well-cut sandstone blocks preserved to 20 courses, more than 3 meters in height. Its eastern and northern walls were built directly on top of a quarry front, which enhances their height from the outside. So when we started the excavation in December 2021, we were expecting some kind of religious installation, but instead we found a mill house with 2 Olantus mills. One of them was still in situ. So we have an uncommon mill house situated on top of a mountain. Understanding the purpose of this structure is difficult, as it seems illogical to transport wheat to such a high location for grinding. Could it be speculated that this place was used for producing flour and bread for pilgrims or members of a cult? Or maybe it could be used for food preparation. A wooden stick, probably a tool handle, was found stuck inside the facing of the eastern wall. Since it was stuck in the wall's foundation and buried in the leveling fields, this tool stick provides a terminus post quem in 193 BCE for the construction of this building and possibly for the whole southern sanctuary. The function of this building remains yet very enigmatic, but a study of the archaeobotanical material has been undertaken by the EcoSeed team, and it's currently ongoing. The preliminary results identify a diverse and wide range of plant species, including date palms, grapes, pomegranates, melon, figs, wheat, barley, and mallow. Numerous phytolith samples were taken on the various millstones of the building. The studies are as well in progress and will soon bring a clearer vision about the function of this room and the sanctuary. If we take a step back and combine these dates with the chronology of the kingdom of Minéens established by Jérémy Chitokat and Munir Arbash and the mention of kings found on Minéan inscription associated with Dadan, we come up with groups 6 and 7 of this chronology, with kings such as Wakahil Sadiq, Ilyafa Yashu, and Wakahil Nabat, reigning prosperously over the kingdom of Minéens in the 3rd and 2nd centuries BCE. I don't have the time or the distance to elaborate today on the Minéan presence in Dadan, but I can show you these 2 views. One taken from the Minéan high place of Jabal Hurayba towards Daraj, and the other one from the high place of Daraj, a sanctuary dedicated to Dugebat, the titular deity of the Dadanites towards Dadan. There is plenty of new evidences of the presence of the Minéans in Daraj that we just discovered last month with the co-director of the Daraj assessment project, Ingrid Pericella-Valero, that I would like to thank here. And I hope that we will have the opportunity to present it to you soon. And thank you for your attention.